What I've learned about technologies from the process of constructing our movie Helsing was that filmmaking takes much more on than what you would expect. People may think that filmmaking is taking up a random camera and shooting a couple of scenes with a couple of people doing something, but it is actually much more than that. To begin to understand filmmaking, you have to learn a lot about camera work, in which you have to take into consideration camera angles and movements, and also shot types and framing. So you really have to learn and reflect on that in order to even scratch the surface of a higher level quality work. Otherwise, when you place things together, the outcome looks completely amateur, which means you would not want to do that if you really want to secure your level 4 grades. Also, I have learned lots about how to work in front of the camera, how certain movements have to be precisely choreographed, otherwise, it looks quite fake. For example, in my own sequence, I initially intended to deliver a fight scene between my main character and the mugger who she is chasing. Therefore, I began to search for the techniques that would allow me to do a realistic fight. So I looked up on techniques, I looked up some videos on how to do stunts for movies and how you were expected to act for a fight scene. So when we would go out and shoot, the actors would be quite trained in what to do in front of the camera and not just do some random movements which would compromise the look of the film and even their own safety. So I spent a couple of so I sent out a couple of videos to my actors to learn what to do in front of the camera, and we also ran our test shot where we rehearsed most of the movements that you'd be using on the movie. So unfortunately, we did not have much time to film the actual fight scene because it was too complex, but it had to be cut off from the movie. However, the sequence still looked quite great without it, so it wasn't much of a concern for me and for our group. Moving on to the editing process, I've learned so much in terms of editing and placing things together so they can actually look like a film opening sequence. And the challenge that I was quite eager to take on was how to work with Final Cut Pro. So we got help from our teacher who gave us a lesson on how to work most of the common things in Final Cut, and it was really useful because we didn't start to edit our sequences on the dark. We actually knew what we were doing and how we would be working with the program. So it was a great challenge to work with Final Cut Pro, but one that I'm quite proud of because I've spent some amount of my own free time just trying out new features and discovering new shortcuts and effects that could be taken in and would be boosting up the quality of my work. Another great challenge that I took on was how to work with Adobe After Effects, and this is the type of program that you have to learn multiple ways of doing the same thing in order to develop your own way of manipulating your footage. And from my perspective of working with After Effects, was working with it was one of my greatest achievements in the process of making my sequence. There were times which I would go completely frustrated because I could not get the right look, or I would accidentally press a random button and try to undo the steps I've just made, and I ended up messing up the whole footage that I was editing. So I just had to get rid of that one, load up a new clean footage and begin all over from scratch. And that made me really annoyed at some times, but what I wasn't realizing behind all that was that every time that I made a mistake, that I got it wrong and began to do it again, the process of setting up the masks and adding up the effects and drawing up curves and so on were being printed onto my head. So when I finally finished up tweaking all footage to look the way I wanted to, I didn't even have to look back to the tutorial video that I was following because all the steps were already stuck on my head and I knew exactly where to put things. I knew exactly where to go and what to do and so on. I was following two different tutorial videos and I realized that neither of them were going to deliver me to teach me accurately what I wanted to do with my own footage. So I took what I learned from both videos and applied it onto mine and made my way around it, and the final outcome was quite great because it was just as I planned in my head a couple of months ago. I believe that I have right now the beginner's skills, like a beginner's skill level of filmmaking and editing, and I would improve most of my skills because when you're out there actually shooting your footage, it is such a great feeling that you will be shooting a sequence and you'll be putting it together and it will look great, that you actually forget some of the essential principles of filmmaking. Sometimes the excitement of shooting the footage can be so great that you would partially forget some of the basic elements of camera movements and framing types. You would not look as closely as you should be looking for that, and you could actually compromise the whole of the footage. So I would definitely put that on my list of improvements, to pay a closer attention to these details because it could really make a difference from a poorer grade to a higher grade. I also would boost up my knowledge about After Effects because it's such a great program to know your way around it, and you can create such amazing things with it. So I am definitely committed to learn new things on this program.